Hello, and welcome to 10 Minutes With. Today I'm joined by Alexander Natz and Simone Boselli, and we will be talking about how we can make rare disease treatments more affordable and accessible. Welcome, gentlemen.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, I'd like to start by a really kind of high-level question. So, Simone, can you please explain really simply in really basic terms why it's important that organisations like EURORDIS, patient organisations, work with pharmaceutical companies in order to provide more effective and affordable treatments?
There are many reasons why we should work together with therapies developer, not necessarily only the biopharmaceutical companies, but also academic developers, not-for-profit, particularly for a reason that is very dear to our heart. Patient can represent and talk about the full experience that it is to live with a rare disease. And by doing so, and by doing it very early on, we can work together with developers to produce therapies that respond to effective needs for the patients. And we do that with a whole range of stakeholders from the developer side, from the large, the small and medium pharmaceutical company, but also at the academic level. And bringing therapies to the market, or to the patient effectively, is so important that you can make change on the life of an entire community revolving around one single patient.
Alexander, can you give us some examples that really stand out to you where this kind of collaboration has been particularly effective?
I mean, it is at various levels. It is really important, as Simone mentioned, to work together, to be part of a multi-stakeholder setting. And we've been seeing lots of examples here, I think here in Brussels, at the Brussels level. When it comes to real-world evidence, there is an initiative, Real-World Evidence for Decision, where we, even I think 6 years ago, started to discuss where can we use real-world evidence, especially in rare diseases, but not only in rare diseases, also in other areas. How can we make better use of that data which is out? I mean, nowadays it's all about data. We're talking about the European Health Data Space. And I think we have been a bit front runners in a multi-stakeholder setting, including payers, including patient groups, including industry, and HTAs to really find common ground. How can we better use data?
No, if I may add one thing is that in the last 7 years since I joined EURORDIS, we have participated in many of these, and I think the change to put the patient at the forefront of this initiative is coming and has really grounded in legislative and policy work. We still have quite a bit of a way to do to involve the patient really early in the design of clinical trials, to discuss what clinical endpoints are really meaningful, and to bring that expertise also at the regulatory and assessment and pricing and reimbursement level.
Absolutely.
You both briefly mentioned there the upcoming revisions to the EU's pharmaceutical legislation. So just to take a step back, can you explain to our viewers what exactly these revisions are, what they're going to include, or what it's looking like they're going to include, and why they're important?
So,
big question.
Alexander is the lawyer here, so I will let him talk about the details. I would try to talk about the objectives and the intention. Brilliant. And the impact that this reform will have is not a question of when, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when this will have an impact, because it has already had an impact. Yeah. We are now seeing a reform, or proposed reform, that hasn't been done in over 20 years. But we have experience of 23 years of the orphan medicinal product legislation. The intention of the legislation, in this case the European Commission, is to build up on this experience, but to adapt to the development in science and in development in society. So to respond to the challenges that you mentioned in your opening of getting more therapies that are more accessible, affordable in Europe, what is proposed by this legislation is several measures. There are two pieces, one directive and one regulation, that deals with the placement of products on the market, the directive, and the regulation includes the incentives that are given to developers to develop products for the general population and for specific population that are underserved, specifically rare diseases and pediatric population. Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to add, Simone. I mean, you made very important points, which I completely share. And I mean, it is, in a way, it is normal that you revise legislation after 20 years of its existence.
Of course, yeah.
And legislation takes time to bring results. And when we look at the orphan legislation, I think we have seen that only in the late 26, 27, 28 years, we've been seeing more and more orphan drugs coming to European markets. So it took some time from 2008 to have a robust framework so that companies invested in that area, which is ultimately what we wanted. And in the 2010 years, we've seen more and more orphan drugs reaching European markets and European patients. It is true, however, that we need to get better in having a better access of patients to orphan medicinal products, because we are talking about centrally approved medicines. And in an ultimate scenario, they should be available in 27 member states. In an ultimate scenario, I would even say at the same earliest possible point in time. So indeed, we need to have discussions about how can we have better results for patients, because ultimately a product which is approved is worth nothing for the patient when it's not available in the country where the patient lives. And so we need all stakeholders around the table, and the Commission has been putting some emphasis on that element. It has also putting some emphasis on fine-tuning, as Simone said before, the regulatory framework. And I must say, and here I really want to be a bit on the positive side, that we have a robust regulatory system. We have a competitive agency when I compare it to the FDA and the leading agencies in the world. The EMA is among those agencies. We need to stay competitive at this level, but we also need to get better and collaborate a bit more when it comes to how can we use real-world evidence for informed payer decisions. We need to speed up these processes at the national level. And it takes all to be involved in this decision-making processes. It takes ultimately as well the national decision-makers to say yes to medicines. It's not only industry launching, but it's also those decision-makers. But industry plays a role.
So to end, I'd like to bring it back to the people that are watching this. So this, as you have both indicated, is a very complex issue. It's not something that can necessarily be understood particularly easily. It's very complex. There's lots of moving parts at any one time. What would be your piece of advice to patient advocates or to people in the rare disease community who are looking to at least stay informed as to what's happening and to understand what's going on and how this can impact them?
I actually would like to dispel the myth. I mean, yes, there
please,
is.
Yes.
No. There is. I mean, you can say that is complex. There is complexity in it, but essentially, we're talking about listening to a patient, understanding the disease, diagnose it properly, apply the science, developing a treatment. This is what it is. All of the rest is regulating what is in it, but that's fundamentally, it's complex. I'm not denying it that the fundamentals of financing development of therapies are not complex. For people that want to get into the issue more, to bring their own experience, be that at the discovery level or at the regulatory level, we provide that support. And yes, if anything from our patient community or anyone wants to hear a little bit more, you can write to us, to me in particular, and to my colleagues here, and in Paris and in Barcelona, to see what we can bring you up to speed.
With the upcoming European elections, what would be your one piece of advice to incoming MEPs to support both treatments and access to treatments, but more generally rare diseases?
Alexander, yes, please.
Yes, I mean, the first thing I would advise policymakers is listening to the patients first, because the patients know best where there are areas of unmet need, where we need new therapy options. So that's really important. And I think the EU is a bit of a front runner in that respect. When I look at the EU HTA, when I compare it to my country in Germany, the patient voice in the HTA assessment is much less heard in Germany than it is in the future, and hopefully in the EU HTA context. So it's first listening to the patient's voice when it comes to designing treatments, having the right framework for innovative treatments, but also listening to the needs of industry to make sure that we actually in Europe remain competitive and that we get access to innovative treatments for rare disease patients.
Yeah.
Thank you both. You have been watching 10 Minutes With, a new format from EURORDIS Rare Diseases Europe, hosted by me, Rhiannon Walls, where we talk about what matters to you.